We are going to be watching a video today. The content creator is Trust Me Bro, so go subscribe to him. Dumb rules for smart reasons.
Dumb rules that exist for smart reasons. The sliced bread ban. I know, shocking, right? I didn't believe it when I heard it either. Mainly because every time you hear about sliced bread, it's always within the context of how amazing it is. Which I find a bit ironic because it seems like most people hold the invention of sliced bread in higher regard than the invention of...
Do you think that they're arresting people who slice bread? Wait, that's my first impression. I really don't know. He could be pulling like a little nook and cranny on us. I don't know.
Actual bread. You know, the food that literally sustained humanity for generations? That's besides the point. When sliced bread came out, it was one of the biggest inventions of all time, at least according to catchphrases. But did you know that there was a period of history, albeit brief, where the United States government literally banned sliced bread? Let me explain. The entire sliced bread saga dates all the way back to 1912, when a man named Otto Frederick Rohwedder created the first prototype for an automatic bread slicer. Although this prototype would stay exactly that for a few years. And unfortunately, only 5 years later in 1917, a fire at his warehouse not only destroyed his bread slicing prototype, but also destroyed all of the documentation around it. That includes the blueprints, the spare parts, the other versions he was working on. Literally everything associated with this initial prototype was destroyed in a fire, delaying one of the best inventions of all time by another decade. 11 years later in 1928, with the help from the Chillicothe Baking Company in Missouri, Otto's invention was finally able to get picked up off the ground. Not only were they beginning to use this prototype machine, but they also took the greatest step forward in the baking industry since bread was wrapped, meaning that even back then, nearly 100 years ago, people were so enthusiastic about bread innovation. The start of the sliced bread craze was slow, but after a few years and many large-scale marketing campaigns, sliced bread was a house...
Did I read that correctly? Wait, why do these look so old? Wait, what year is this? Dude, did they only figure out how to slice bread in like the 1940s? Like don't they have like knives and stuff? Or is this like automated? This is probably like automated bread slicing. That's probably what it is, just to like, you know, get it out there. Yeah, Wonder Cut bread. Why have I seen that before? Is Wonder Cut bread still around?
It was slow, but after a few years and many large-scale marketing campaigns, sliced bread was a household staple by the 1930s. And by the late 1930s, it was a necessity in every household. Okay. And it was also around this time when Wonder Bread was invented. You know, the bread that literally looks like...
Yeah. I've seen that before. It's like the sugary bread, right? Yeah. It's like the bread that's like, I don't know, it's like processed or something. Like it's weird. It's like processed sugar bread.
Printer paper. But of course, this video isn't about the history of bread, and we've already discussed what the dumb rule was, so what was the smart reason for this weird ban? And without giving too much away, let me just say that this ban took place in 1943, a time when World War II was in full effect, and the United States of America was heavily involved. It shouldn't come as a surprise that during World War II, rations were a way of life to ensure that there was...
Oh, I mean, during this time, I guess they were rationing, and if you like ate too much like food or something, too much bread, I assume, they would just like arrest you? I don't know. That seems like the most plausible like explanation for why they would ban bread. Maybe they were trying to keep the bread for the soldiers or something. And like if they caught you out on the street with a piece of bread, then you just get absolutely like terminated.
Proper availability and supply chain to supply our troops overseas with everything they needed to, in this case, kick some Nazi butt. But these rations came with a price. Besides the inherent restricted lifestyle experienced by everyday Americans, there was also frequent unexpected shortages. For example, sugar or rubber tires running in short supply. And it was because of this that the American government was becoming more and more anxious about not having the proper supplies or supply chain to fund one of the most important wars of all time. And it was actually this anxiety that led to the banning of sliced bread. On January 18th, 1943, Claude R. Wickard, the head of the War Foods Administration, declared that selling sliced bread was illegal. His rationale for this was because sliced bread required thicker wrapping paper to stay fresh.
Really?
And he argued with the banning of sliced...
Okay, so it's not the bread itself, it's the wrapping paper. Or I guess they banned the bread because of the wrapping paper costing too many resources or something. I mean, can't they just like wrap the bread in thinner like paper? Am I crazy for that? Like just put the loaf in like some printer paper, you know, like some 50-cent printer paper, and just like, you know, cut down a couple trees. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Bread that more wax paper would be available, once again, for the troops overseas. But not only would we save wax paper, but we would save steel that would otherwise go to the production of new bread slicing machines. Now, admittedly, I can kind of see both sides of this, because A, this definitely sucks and seems extremely arbitrary, and I feel like there's other corners to be cut. But at the same end, when you are literally fighting in World War II, I think there is no better expression than desperate times call for desperate measures. But with that being said, this ban on sliced bread was definitely not met with acceptance. And almost instantly, there was public...
Were there people like rebelling over sliced sliced bread and just like just processing sliced bread and eating them in the streets. Don't tell me that people were actually getting arrested because they couldn't eat sliced bread. Like there's so many other foods out there. I mean, they were probably rationing a bunch of them, but dude, that's actually insane.
Like outrage, specifically among housewives in America, who at this time in many cases were expected to be not only single parents, homemakers, and also full-time factory workers to ensure that the labor force didn't collapse. When these women learned that one of their newest luxuries was going to be taken away from them, they were understandably upset. And there was even a famous quote that was written in a letter to the New York Times only a week after the ban took place. The quote goes as such:
That's insane though. Like to think that bread is a luxury. Like, I mean, I guess during this time they didn't have a whole lot of things. I mean, I assume they already had cars by this time. I'm pretty sure they did. But like bread was a luxury back then, or I guess it was like a household luxury. Like now you could just like buy bread for like what, like $7, $6 or $7 at like Walmart. It's actually insane how things progress over time and how available it is now.
I'd like to let you know how important sliced bread is to the morale and the saneness of a household. My husband and 4 children are all in a rush during and after breakfast. Without ready sliced bread, I must do the slicing for toast, 2 pieces each. That's 10. For their lunches, I must cut by hand at least 20 slices for 2 sandwiches apiece. Afterwards, I make my own toast. That's 22 slices of bread to cut in a hurry. That is only one example from one woman, but it paints a picture of how the American people were feeling at this time, coupling not only the annoyance of sliced bread being banned, but also all of the other rations taking place and a literal world war happening overseas. And it was because of all of the public outcry that only 3 months after the ban was introduced, the ban was appealed and sliced bread was once again legal in the United States. I wanted to add this entry very first on the list because I thought the concept of sliced bread being banned was so funny. And while I think we can all agree that this was definitely a dumb rule, I would hope that at least most of us could agree that there was definitely a good reason for this rule. Specifically, doing everything humanly possible to ensure that the Americans and the Allies destroy one of the most evil regimes to ever exist. But let's keep moving. The bear wrestling ban. This rule is dumb not because it seems nonsensical or arbitrary, but because why is this rule even required? Anybody with half a brain and potentially somebody with even a quarter of a brain would understand not to wrestle a bear, right? Well, apparently not people in Alabama in the 1970s.
Of course it's Alabama. Of course it's Alabama. I want to wrestle a bear. Like, of course it's Alabama in the 1970s.
I don't know about you, but when I first read this ban, I instantly envisioned a person walking into the woods, finding a bear randomly, and then wrestling it. But that is not at all what was happening and not what caused...
Imagine just wrestling a grizzly bear. Do you guys know how big freaking grizzly bears are? Like, let's see a side-by-side comparison. It's actually insane. Look at the size of that thing, and that's its baby. No, that's a black bear. Never mind. But look at that big grizzly bear. Even the little black bear is insane. Yo, polar bears are 9 feet tall? No. This can't be true. I knew grizzly bears were massive, but I didn't know that freaking polar bears were 9 feet tall. That is insane. Bro, people in Alabama in the 1970s were bare-handed wrestling. No pun intended. Oh my gosh. That is an insane picture.
The good reason behind this seemingly obvious rule is actually pretty upsetting. During the 1970s, 80s, and even 1990s, bear wrestling was an extremely popular part of circus culture in the United States. It's also no surprise that these animals are typically not treated well. But potentially one of the poorest treated animals in the entire show was the bear, specifically meant for wrestling. Just for a moment, imagine you're the leader of a circus and you want to have a spectacular bear wrestling act in your circus. How do you go about achieving this safely? Do you A, scrap the idea because this seems unsafe and immoral? B, train a bear to wrestle safely so it can put on a show but also keep your performer safe? Or C, torture, drug, and mutilate the bear until the point that it is so limp and brain dead that literally anybody with
they trained the bear to be feral to like put them against wrestlers. That's insane. That's actually insane. Like, why didn't they just like feed it? Like why did they just feed it and like, I don't know, put on like make it a stunt bear or something, you know? That'd be much safer. I don't think there'd be a difference.
Pulse could wrestle it successfully. The answer is obviously C, and that's exactly what happened. Ringleaders knew that they couldn't risk having their talent hurt or killed because that would affect profits. And they also knew that training a bear would take too long. So the porridge that was just right was to literally feed the bear a consistent chemical cocktail to keep them subdued, remove their teeth and claws so they had no opportunity to fight back, and on top of both these things, consistently torture the bear and keep them malnourished in between shows so that the bear is consistently weak and in a state of fear, meaning that it would rather cower than actually fight back. And one of the most disgusting examples of profiteering off this act was not only having circus staff wrestle these bears for a show, but they would actually sell people in the crowd access to wrestle the bear to look tough. And you just know if that a ringleader felt so
sad.
confident
Oh
to
my
have
gosh.
anybody at the circus wrestle their bear, they were messing up the bear
don't
so
wanna be
much
a
that
bear
there was
in
no way it could
1970s
hurt
Alabama.
anybody. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these bears should have killed fans or circus employees. I'm just saying they shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
not even mentioning the extremely questionable methods the circuses used to acquire these bears. And of course, these bear wrestling matches didn't just happen once or twice. They were so prevalent that states had to create their own laws banning them. For example, Alabama made bear wrestling a Class B felony. And this law passed only in 1996, after a lot of the
Yeah,
damage was
that's
already
fair
done.
enough to
But I
protect
guess
the
better late
wildlife
than
or
never.
whatever.
But interestingly, this law was repealed a decade ago in 2015. Not because they wanted to bring back bear wrestling, but because the law was no longer necessary. Circus culture
Wait,
had died
what?
down.
Oh, okay. But why would they appeal it? Or yeah, why would they appeal the law? Why not just keep the law and like just prevent anybody from doing it? Like that actually makes no sense to me. Like I hope he explains like why they would want to appeal that. Maybe people are like trying to wrestle bears in the forest or something, or like I don't know. I've got no clue. That's silly to me. Like just keep the law.
Significantly, and bear wrestling was officially a thing of the past. And quite frankly, this law was more or less of a publicity stunt than a traditional piece of legislation. Obviously, this was an enforceable felony, although it was stated that the creation of this law was more or less of an act aimed to support animal welfare and public safety. But yeah, upon a first listen, hearing that wrestling bears is now banned seems redundant and weird. But when you actually learn the story of it, it makes total sense. The dissection debate. This is actually the first rule we're going to discuss that doesn't ban something, it actually allows something. But be warned, this one is pretty morbid. The dumb rule that is in play here is known as the Autonomy Act of 1832, and this rule states that doctors, teachers, and medical students in Britain can legally dissect the bodies of unclaimed dead from warehouses, prisons, and hospitals. Upon a first listen, that not only sounds dumb, but also sounds pretty immoral. Like, just think about it. If somebody dies in prison or in a hospital and they can't find a living family member, which it probably wasn't easy to find a living family member in 1832, the body was essentially just up for grabs to any doctor, teacher, or medical student. That to me sounds like a slippery slope and a lot of
makes sense, but why your teacher? Like I know that barbers back in the day were like given the task of so many things like surgery and stuff. Like they were like barbers back in the day were surgeons, believe it or not. But why teachers? Like it actually doesn't make sense. Like a professor? Oh, maybe like medical teachers or something like that. That would make sense. Now that would make sense. But like just like your average school day teacher just like operating on you and just like, you know, I don't know. That's strange to me. That's strange to me.
Room for a lot of malpractice, to say the least. But believe it or not, this dark and dumb rule actually saved a lot of lives. See, prior to the Autonomy Act, the only way that doctors, teachers, and medical students could dissect a body was if the government gave these individuals the body of an executed criminal. This, for a long time, was standard practice. Somebody breaks the law, they get killed for it, and the body gets essentially donated to science. But issues began to rise when in the 18th and 19th centuries, medical schools needed more and more cadavers to not only teach, but learn more about the human anatomy. And it was with this rise of education and bodily exploration that the supply of these bodies were nowhere near the demand. And unfortunately, this gap in the market led to some very unethical practices. One of the main side hustles that was born out of this shortage was something known as body snatching. And it would go a little something like this. If you were a poor individual living in the slums of London and needed to get a few bucks, an easy way for you to get some quick cash is to take a shovel, wait till it's nighttime, and then go to the nearest graveyard. Dig up any body that was freshly buried and take it to any of the local
they're like grave robbing or grave digging for the body. Wait, isn't that still illegal though? Wait, that's illegal now, no? Wait, of course it is. He's probably gonna talk about it.
Universities. You know that these universities have money and you know that they need bodies. So a lot of these universities were at this point in time willing to pay cash money for bodies, no questions asked. And it only got worse when people decided that they could optimize on this strategy. And by that I mean that these body snatchers decided that they would just cut out the middleman. Why go dig up a dead body if you could just make a dead body? And by that I mean people would literally just kill people.
Like I said, yeah, they just shank people in the middle of the streets and just like serve their bodies to the freaking teachers and medical students. That's insane, bro. That is so bad. They had to have like repealed that law.
And then take the body of their murdered victim directly to the university for cash money. This was more or less of the peak of body snatching. And when this specific story broke and spread across all of Britain, the government knew they had to do something. And it was at that exact moment when the Autonomy Act of 1832 was established. So while it may seem odd that any unclaimed undesirable can just be donated to science against their will, I think the rule makes a lot more sense once you realize that a lack of bodies was not only creating a scientific bottleneck, but was also creating a nationwide trend of grave robbing and eventually murder. This dumb and morbid law actually had a pretty good reason, especially considering the time frame. Like in the 1800s, there was nowhere near the medical standards that there are today. Okay, this is off topic, but do you smell that? It smells like you didn't shower. And if that's the case, I feel bad bad for your anime body pillow. But in case you did, you're obviously not. This one is really peculiar. In 2014, the state of New York effectively put a ban on taking selfies with tigers and any other big cats. I think to most of us, that sounds...
Wait, yeah, that sounds reasonable, like taking selfies with the tiger. I mean, like, how do you even get into that situation? I mean, if it's at a zoo, okay, that's fair enough. But if it's like not in an enclosure and you're taking selfies with it, dude, I don't think you want to, live at that point. I don't think we are gonna have that problem. I don't have a problem with this ban.
Pretty dumb. But the reason why they did this makes a lot of sense, and it's actually quite short. The government of New York was getting so many copyright complaints from tigers from people who were taking pictures of them and selling them without giving proceeds to the tigers. And because the government of New York did not want to deal with any more lawsuits from tigers over copyright disputes, they decided to
Yo, this is so... No. Wait. Are we talking about actual tigers or mascot tigers? This makes no sense. The tigers aren't getting the copyrights to their own pictures? What? What are they even talking about? What are they yapping about right now?
Ban selfies altogether. That was obviously a total lie. I just made it up. Here's the real scoop.
Sorry.
New York didn't necessarily ban taking selfies with tigers. What they did do was specifically ban any member of the public being near any dangerous animal in a circus, zoo, or carnival that is not in a safe and confined cage. And
so
while
like
it may seem like I'm
kinda
reaching here, the purpose of this ban, keeping people and dangerous animals separated, was specifically inspired by the rise of tiger selfies. During the early 2010s, the dating app Tinder saw a massive surge of men on the platform using pictures of themselves next to tigers as one of their profile photos. And
there's no way that's the reason why they banned selfies with tigers. Cause freaking Chad over here's like, yo, I'm gonna take a picture with the tiger right here. Look at my tiger. Yo,
trend was so prevalent, in fact, that the Wall Street Journal estimates that 1 out of 10 people had a photo with a tiger on their Tinder. Obviously, these men wanted to seem tough and adventurous.
Yo, but is this like a zoo? I don't know if that changed. This is obviously a zoo, though. Like, I don't know how he got in the enclosure. This makes no sense.
But in reality, all they were doing, in most cases, was contributing to animal exploitation. And when this was all brought to the state of New York, they not only recognized it, but sought to put an end to it. And how they went about it was, of course, the tiger selfie ban. Because no, you can't ban taking a picture with an animal, but you can ban people from being around these dangerous animals. And this ban was pretty effective, considering the New York government knew that all these men that were taking these pictures to look tough knew that they wouldn't look nearly as tough if the tiger was in a cage behind them. And this ban was honestly pretty genius, because these people that were taking pictures with tigers and lions to look tough wouldn't want to have photos of them with a tiger in a cage, because then they wouldn't look tough at all. It would just look like they're taking a selfie at the zoo, completely nullifying the trend, helping mitigate animal exploitation. Similar to the ban of bear wrestling, tigers or lions or jaguars or any big cats that were specifically used for photo ops were not well taken care of in the slightest. A lot of these poor cats were bought young, taken away from their mothers, and for basically all of their life treated poorly and used as a toy and a means to earn profit. When this trend was on the rise in the early 2010s, people were booking all kinds of big cat experiences. Tiger kitten play date, tiger kitten photo op, lion photo op, have a lion at your wedding. Anything you could have imagined, people were buying lions specifically with the purpose of pimping them out at public events to have them look cool. And obviously, if you're bringing a big cat to a public setting, the cat has to be extremely subdued, or in some cases, tortured, malnourished, declawed, defanged, drugged, and the like. And if you ever watched that documentary Tiger King, then you kind of get the idea of the dark business behind the whole big cat picture industry. And just like how Alabama wanted to stop the exploitation of bears, New York sought to stop the exploitation of big cats, which they did with their 2014 tiger selfie ban. A seemingly dumb rule with, in my opinion, a pretty smart plan of attack. The kitty cat cigarette ban. Okay, I swear, this video isn't a Trojan horse for me to get on my vegan soapbox talking about animal cruelty. But coincidentally, there has been a lot of interesting laws surrounding animals, but for the sake of repetition, I'll keep this one brief. Similar to the second law we discussed, this ban isn't dumb because it seems arbitrary, it just seems extremely, well, redundant and nonsensical. The ban I'm specifically referring to is the ban that Illinois placed on handing your pet a nicotine stick. To put it bluntly, in Illinois, it is explicitly stated that it is illegal to, quote, give a lit cigar or cigarette to a cat.
Wait, so you're telling me that it's illegal to give little kitty, little whiskers over there, a blunt? Is that what you're telling me? Why do they need laws like this? Okay, it's gonna be something like people during this time period were like, I don't know, smoking with their cats, and it was like causing. How do you even progress to that? I'm actually so curious.
Dog or other domestic pet, including ball python, and that's essentially the entire law. You cannot give a lit cigar or cigarette to your cat, dog, domestic pet, or explicitly stated ball python, because of course everybody's giving a lit cigar to their ball python. It's reported that this law comes from the early 1800s and by today's standards is relatively outdated, which I would agree with. But I wanted to mention it quickly because it, more than anything, just kind of sounded funny. And also just makes you think, how often was this happening if the state of Illinois had to not only recognize it, but ban it? Obviously, the good reason behind this dumb law is to prevent pets from unintentionally burning themselves or even setting themselves on fire or potentially even trying to smoke and getting addicted. It was believed that this law was put into place as a general effort to prevent animal cruelty, which is obviously something that's completely reasonable. Although this law is just kind of notable and in my opinion hilarious because of how specific it is.
Yeah, that is
the fact that legislators in Illinois had to explicitly exclaim and write with a quill in ink that no lit cigar or cigarette shall be given to any domestic pet, including cats, dogs, hamsters, and ball pythons, to me is hilarious and noteworthy, and we're gonna move on, but I just wanted to share it. And if you were curious, yes, this law is still active today. The no spitting sanction. First and foremost, get your mind out of the gutter. Now let's move on. I think we can all agree that if you see somebody walking down the road just spitting on the sidewalk, it's definitely not polite and pretty gross. But is it something that's worthy of a ban? Well, unless it becomes some sort of national trend, I don't see it as something worthy of government intervention. However, there was a time when the United States government decided that it was in their best interest to ban any form of spitting in any public area. And this wasn't one of those obscure laws with a deeper meaning like some of the other ones we've discussed. No, this was a straightforward law that was not only written and passed, but also had signs placed everywhere reminding individuals and also had strict enforcement. But the question remains, what was the smart reasoning behind this dumb rule? And the answer, some of you might have guessed, is health related. During 1918, during the last year of World War I, across the United States were dealing with a major Spanish flu pandemic. This pandemic was extremely deadly and the spread of this disease was seemingly never ending, which is why the US government was pretty desperate to do anything that could potentially stop the spread. During the time of the Spanish flu, over a century ago, health officials believed that diseases like influenza and tuberculosis were spread through saliva droplets. And it was because of this belief that they held that would later essentially be found true.
But were people really spitting that much on the ground though during this time period? Like, I don't know. I mean, do you know anybody who spits on the ground just like randomly in public areas?
That their best course of action to help prevent the spread would be to minimize the creation of saliva droplets, which meant no spitting, specifically in any public place. Sidewalks, trains, theaters, anywhere. If you were caught spitting, you would be fined and potentially even arrested, which is just crazy to think about now. But during 1918, during the Spanish flu pandemic, I wouldn't want to even be in a public place, let alone spitting in one, making this seemingly dumb rule make a lot more sense with context. But now let's get to the final entry on this list, the bubblegum ban. Chances are, if you've heard of any of the dumb rules on this list, it's this one. And that's because this country's gum ban is extremely infamous. And I would actually bet money that you know the country that has this gum ban.
Let's think about this. Let's think about this. Which country would ban bubble gum? North Korea? North Korea? I mean, what country would ban bubble gum though? Japan? You guys are thinking, you're thinking Japan? I don't know. Why would they ban bubble gum? Like, I feel like they could like market bubble gum as like some anime kawaii, like Hatsune Miku bubble gum or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just spitballing. Not that I know anything like that.
Ban. And if you guess Singapore, you'd be right. The whole bubblegum ban.
Singapore? Wait, why Oh, let me think. Isn't Singapore like one of the most cleanest cities in the world? Singapore is the most cleanest city, or it's the most dirty. I forgot. It's the most dirty or most cleanest. It's one of the two. And I guess if they want to prevent like trash waste or whatever, then I guess banning bubblegum would make sense. But like, why not just make a ban on littering? You know what I mean?
And in Singapore is regarded as one of those dumb laws or arbitrary laws, but the actual history behind this bubblegum ban is very much so rooted in the history and culture of Singapore. And in my opinion, has some pretty good reasoning behind it. The origins of this ban date back to 1959, when Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, took office. Lee Kuan Yew is considered the founding father of modern-day Singapore, and it's said that his political leadership is what transformed post-independent Singapore into a highly developed country in the major global hub that it is today. Lee Kuan Yew was literally Prime Minister from 1959 until 1990. That is a major run as Prime Minister. But for 2 years before and after he was Prime Minister, he was also the Secretary General for the People's Action Party. To put it bluntly, this guy was invested in the success of Singapore. But I want to make it clear that I'm not necessarily advocating for Lee whatsoever. Like any politician or any person, there is both good and bad that must be recognized. And with any multi-decade long run as Prime Minister, there's definitely some questionable things that go on. For example, from 1968 to 1981, Singapore, under the control of Lee, instated a one-party state. And because of this, he employed defamation laws and detention without trial, as well as other propaganda and social engineering techniques to continue his political success.
Okay, so it was like a dictatorship.
Just keep that in mind. I'm not necessarily vouching for this guy. I'm just trying to unbiasedly state facts about the country. And two of the virtues that Lee held nearest and dearest to his heart was independence and cleanliness. And Lee has even gone on record to state that his goal when he became the Prime Minister of Singapore in 1965 was to, quote, create a first world oasis in a third world region. And he wanted to do so through hyper-independence and, of course, cleanliness. The gum ban specifically was introduced in 1992. It was done so for a plethora of pretty practical reasons. On top of Lee's personal desire to keep the country as clean as possible, chewing gum was actually becoming quite a bit of a nuisance within Singapore specifically. Gum wrappers were littering the streets, chewed gum was stuck on any surface you could imagine, and most notably in the late 1980s, when Singapore launched its mass rapid transit or MTR subway system, vandals began to place chewing gum on the sensors of the train doors, causing them to not open or not close.
It was that bad that people were putting their bubble gum on freaking train door. It was that bad. Yo, that would actually be so disgusting. Oh my gosh, it's actually holding the hydraulic doors together with the chewed pieces of bubble gum. That is insane. That is disgusting. Imagine just like trying to have a seat and you just like sit on a piece of bubble gum. That
when they should have. And this vandalism at scale caused major subway delays, affecting the lives upon thousands and thousands of Singaporeans. And it was this stunt that broke the camel's back and officially led to the banning of chewing gum. But like everything else they've mentioned, it goes a bit deeper than that. Because this ban on chewing gum isn't just about banning minty fresh breath or keeping the subway system on time. Culturally, this ban signified Singapore's philosophy of having a strict government that enforces strong discipline. And the government saw this chewing gum vandalism as an act of rebellion from its citizens. And with the Singaporean government being as strict as it was and is, they decided that they were not going to play games and they wanted to ban it outright. But this ban was twofold, because sure, they wanted to show their civilians and the world that they ruled with an iron fist, but these acts of vandalism also gave them reason to keep the country that much cleaner. Something that a lot of people don't know is that while gum is banned in Singapore, it's not the only odd thing that's banned. Any form of litter is banned, any form of graffiti is banned, jaywalking is banned, spitting is banned, expelling mucus from your nose is banned, and urinating anywhere that is not a toilet is also banned.
No, that's all reasonable. That's all reasonable, but like, I mean, the mucus part isn't as reasonable because like, what if like you just have like a runny nose that day and it just like drips on the sidewalk? I'm just spitballing here, guys. I'm just spitballing. I'm not saying that, you know.
You use a public toilet, you are legally required to flush it. And while most of these things are not legal or accepted in other places, it just goes to show that with these specific legal...
You guys don't know how many times I go into a public restroom and I just see absolutely like the most orange yellowest piss in the toilet seat. It's actually disgusting.
Bans how serious Singapore is about public cleanliness and orderliness. And the chewing gum ban...
But how are they enforcing that you're flushing the toilet though? How are they enforcing that? How are they seeing who doesn't flush the toilet?
Was only an addition of this already ongoing cultural movement. After this seemingly dumb and pretty arbitrary rule was put in place in 1992, many foreign journalists went specifically to Singapore to talk to Lee and question him about the seemingly nonsensical ban. And in every interview, Lee simply defended his point, claiming that you do not take a country from being a struggling country in a, quote, third world region to being a first world oasis without having strong rules, strong discipline, and ruling with an iron fist. Lee has even gone on record to state, quote, "We were called a nanny state, but the result is that we are today better behaved and we live in a more agreeable place than 30 years ago." And when one reporter tried to press Lee claiming that banning chewing gum could be banning the creativity of some individuals, Lee simply said, quote, "If you can't think because you can't chew, try a banana." I have no personal opinion on Lee or the country of Singapore, and I personally don't think I'd want to live in a country with such strict rules. Although it's hard to argue against the political career of Lee and the success that Singapore has had in such a short period of time as a result of some of these seemingly dumb rules. And I'm curious to know what you guys think in the comments below. And I guess with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, check out the video on screen right now. It's a video I made of facts that everybody believes.
Yo, this guy's actually a really good content creator. I really enjoyed that video. Dumb rules that exist for smart reasons. Yo, W, trust me, bro. This guy's awesome, bro. All right, guys, let's go to the next video.